We are live. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, Ioana and Katja and everybody out there, I want to say hello, a very big hello on this gray and very windy pandemic night. We're living in interesting times, and I wish you all faith and resilience. But it's not all bad because foxes are up in Toronto and wild turkeys seem to be taking over Montreal. My name is Leila Marshy. I'm Associate Editor for Linda Leith Publishing. Welcome and thank you for joining us in the conversation, assuming we're live. I think we're live. This chassé-croisé, ça va se passer en anglais et français avec Ioana Georgescu and Katja Grubisic. And just so you know, as we're going, if you could post some questions. If you have questions, please post them on our Facebook page. That page where you are watching the video in the comments. We will see them and we will get to them towards the end. So tonight we will be speaking about Daughter of Here, written by Ioana Georgescu and translated from the French into English by Katja Grubisic. It is a novel that the Montreal Review of Books has called intellectually seamless, multi-layered, and rhythmic. The Miramichi Reader has called it a cinema lover's delight, which is very interesting because we will see that that has special extra meaning. Daughter of Here is a story rich with meaning and impact as it travels around the world and through our hearts. The author, Ioana Georgescu's art and video and photographs and paintings have been shown around the world. She has a PhD in comparative literature and she has taught at McGill. She has written 3 novels and Daughter of Here is the first one to be translated into English. She is born in Bucharest and she now lives in Montreal. And Daughter of Here is Katja Grubisic's 4th translation for Linda Leith. She's the coordinator of the Atwater Poetry Project Reading Series, and she was founding member of the Ice House Poetry at Goose Lane. She's been a finalist for the Governor General's, and her collection of poems, What If Red Ran Out, won the Gerald Lampert Award for Best First Book. She lives in Montreal. So how this will work tonight is I'm going to leave the room to these 2 wonderful people. I will pop back in towards the end if there are questions and to close it up. And in between, Ioana and Katja will wade through the pages of Daughter of Here. I do have a first question, actually, and it's something that I'm curious about is, Katja, what drew you to the book? What, when you first read the book, made you think, yes, this is something I want to spend a big chunk of my life on?
Merci Leila, thank you so much for that introduction. Merci surtout à Ioana de participer à cette conversation. Merci à Linda Leith et au Salon du Livre de nous encadrer pour cette édition virtuelle. There's a lot of ways to get to translation, to get to a book, and we can talk about that a little bit more later if you'd like. But my first, I was flipping through the book, and there was one of the opening scenes that's set in Cairo, right at the cusp of the Arab Spring uprising, and yet contained in that one scene, there seemed to be the whole world seemed to be contained in that scene, and so clearly the main character Dolores was already. I thought of it like those maps of the world that you put little pins in to show where you've been to or where people have been to, and it felt like that. It felt like that initial map of her experience was all laid out and so international. And although the concern was very, the tension was very ripe, because there was the sense that the uprising was imminent. There was still this swath of history and geography and the whole 20th and 21st century seemed to be unfolding from this one character in this one scene, even though it was very particularly set and very anchored. I'd be curious, Ioana, je serais curieuse de savoir, en fait, and we can switch back and forth in French,
Yeah.
comme vous voulez, on peut faire les deux. Mais je me demandais, de quel moment est venu le roman? Parce que le roman, donc, peut-être pour offrir un petit précis aux auditeurs, aux auditrices, c'est un roman qui a lieu, je vous laisserai en fait le présenter, mais c'est un roman qui a lieu non seulement au Caire, mais aussi en Roumanie, au Japon, à New York. Donc peut-être, voulez-vous nous offrir un petit précis de narratif?
Yeah.
So I don't know, should I do it in English or in French or anyways? Okay, let's, basically, this novel is part of a series, like I had in mind, first of all, I had in mind a trilogy. So it started with Évanouissement à Shinjuku, then came L'Homme d'Asmara, and the third was La Jetée, which became Daughter of Here. And basically, at some point I couldn't even remember how how La Jetée and Tokyo were, you know, came into this novel because I was already somewhere else. Like I'm always like somewhere else. So I went back and I found the genesis in the first book, where Dolores, who's the main character who actually plays in all these novels at different stages of her life.
Wow.
And sorry? Genesis in the first book, where Dolores, oh, now I can hear myself. I don't know what's happening. Okay. I heard again what I said before. It's kind of, okay. Dolores was the main character who appeared in Évanouissement à Shinjuku, in L'Homme d'Asmara and La Jetée, and which is actually Daughter of Here. And basically, these were like 3 moments in her life, and actually more than 3 moments, because it went in time, like in different directions, because I don't think life is a linear thing and chronological, but every moment splits in other moments. So that's how I managed the whole material. And also inspired by Dusan Makabe, because cinema, we'll speak more about cinema. Cinema is really important in my life and my work. And I use this idea of montage of attraction. So you don't have a linear montage, but sort of Luna Park. He uses the Luna Park term. So this is a bit the way her life was presented in all these novels. And then Mo came very late in the process. Now, when I got to this novel, which had a genesis actually in the first novel, when Dolores has a dream, and I could read that passage if you want. Should I?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Elle fait un drôle de rêve. C'est un film avec Chris Marker. C'est lui qui l'envoie à La Jetée, ce minuscule bar de Tokyo où tous les cinéastes et les artistes vont prendre un verre. CM la dirige à distance dans les allers-retours sur la Dateline. Il téléguide les pas de Dolores dans la ville. Elle va à la recherche de ce bar mythique sous une pluie torrentielle. Elle se perd dans le red light. Ce sont les macros chinois qui l'aident à trouver son chemin. CM, caché dans un endroit secret, agit à distance en guide de guérilla. Elle fait un film aveugle d'après les instructions de Chris Marker. En se réveillant, Dolores lève un verre à la santé du plus grand maître du temps et de la mémoire. Now, when I got this idea for the third novel, I called it La Jetée, basically because of that scene actually, it had to do with the bar before even had to do with cinema. And so, so I had this element of Tokyo in it, but then why Cairo takes such a big place and then Bucharest is because Cairo and Bucharest are 2 cities in my subjective cartography that are kind of, ils sont des jumelles somehow, because when I found Cairo, I found Bucharest in Cairo, and I love that city and I feel at home in that city. So when I was writing this book, I was in Cairo, and I, funnily enough, I mean, strangely, I ended up in an apartment of someone whose book I installed in L'Homme d'Asmara. because when I went to Cairo many times. At first I was traveling, and then I had some projects. So it's a place I went back many times. And one time when I did my projects there in 2005 and 6, I wanted to read more about Cairo. So I read this book by Maria Golia, which was called City of Sand. And it's a beautiful book about Cairo. And I bought it, and I brought it in my, in my bookshelves, and it's there. And then when I wrote L'Homme d'Asmara, I installed the book the way I did with Chris Marker's La Jetée, also the book that you also have. And so I put it there, and it was in my book, the book in the book. And then in 2010, I was looking for an apartment because I wanted to go back for a longer period of time. And someone said, okay, she put me in contact with Maria Golia. She says, I said, Maria Golia, that sounds familiar. And I said, oh, she's the author of City of Sand. So I told her, listen, your book is in my book, and I'm going to get into your apartment. And in her apartment, I found Chris Marker's book. So I lived in that fantastic apartment with that huge window, which became my screen, I think you're really right how you saw it, because that's exactly how it was. Like the first image is that window in the apartment. And I spent a lot of time indoors. So the whole world was in that apartment, and my mind went, outside, and and then history caught up with me, because there's c'est poreux entre le dehors et dedans. So things happened outside, because I was really in a very enclosed space, but full of stories. And outside there was Charles Taylor's. There was like this extravaganza with Mia Farrow and Naomi Campbell with her. But then they found something to do with Ceausescu's grave, whatever. So these things kind of provoked me to then split and go into this Romanian space, so that's how these other cities, and a bit Asmara, which was also another place. But basically the poles of the novel are Cairo and, let's say, Bucharest as its double.
There's maybe I can read a little bit from, there's a great moment towards the end that captures that window. So throughout the whole book, the character of Dolores is very much a watcher. When she lives in New York, she does this video project, kind of cataloging people in the neighborhood without actually giving them a life or a profile, but just watching. And the same thing is true of this window. So maybe I'll just read a section of the French from that chapter, Animation. Yona, I don't know if you want to read the French and I'll read the English, or I can read.
You could read both. Why don't you? Yeah.
And then also when we can switch off later. So the Animation. This is when, towards the end, Dolores is in the apartment in Cairo. I'll read a part in French and a part in English. I won't read both because presumably everybody who's watching speaks both. So, l'oiseau perché sur le fil électrique est de retour dans le cadre de la fenêtre. J'essaie de le photographier, mais il refuse d'être capté. Mon regard est happé, comme d'habitude, par la fenêtre vivante. Elle m'appelle, comme si c'était une personne. Parfois, elle est fermée. Mais souvent, quand je me réveille, il y a déjà des draps, des couvertures ou des tapis qui pendent sur le bord. Les acariens ont eu le temps de prendre l'air au soleil, de se multiplier dans le sable du désert, mélangés à la poussière agitée des rues qui monte jusqu'aux fenêtres. It goes on in my English translation. I've never seen who opens and closes the shutters, or who puts out the washing. A cleaning lady or cleaning man, a housewife left behind by a demanding husband. I conjure up the scene. Immediately before, the person who carries out these tasks must have shaken out the pillows, the cushions, slapped the sofas. The sun is getting stronger. And throughout, there's the sense that she's watching everything, even when there's in the dream sequence. So later on in the book, maybe just to go back a little bit and give our auditrices a little bit more of insight into the book, there's this really fantastic dream sequence where Dolores is in what seems to be a plane crash, and she lands in this devastated neighborhood of Shinjuku, which is almost post-apocalyptic. And what has survived, in fact, is this the apocalypse was nuclear in this case, and so these tomatoes are growing out of control. They're just growing within seconds from seed to plant to to soup, basically. And what happens that she and the pilot in the plane crash, it's basically ketchup festival.
Yeah.
What happens though that she watches them from outside. She and the pilot don't land within the catastrophe. They land on the other side of it, beside this glass wall that they can't breach. And inside that glass wall, donc à l'intérieur de cette scène de tomates qui poussent de façon absurde et gigantesque, il y a entre autres son mari et sa fille. Sa fille qui est Mo, donc vous voulez dire, qui a été introduite un peu dans le roman plus tard. Mais c'est cette inhabilité aussi d'accéder, non seulement de voir et d'être dans la place et toute l'action déferle devant nous, mais l'impossibilité d'y accéder, de toucher ou de changer le cours des choses. Et je ne sais pas si c'est pour vous une métaphore de l'artiste aussi. So, for example, you're in Cairo, you're watching, and in fact, Célestin, the husband, is a photojournalist who's also in the same position. He's always watching. Soit dans les bidonvilles, il prend des photos sans pouvoir vraiment changer le cours des choses. Qu'il soit dans son champ de bataille ou dans une révolution ou n'importe, il ne peut jamais vraiment toucher ou diriger ou affecter les choses. Donc, je ne sais pas si pour vous, c'est une métaphore un peu de la perspective de l'artiste qui reproduit, qui fait écho à la société, mais sans vraiment pouvoir s'y mettre.
Je ne sais pas, c'est peut-être pas aussi sophistiqué, c'est plus... moi, j'aime beaucoup observer, donc c'est vraiment un peu moi, parce que j'aime beaucoup observer les choses, les gens, puis après ça, j'imagine, je peux voir quelqu'un, je peux imaginer une histoire, ou je vois un lieu, puis tout à coup, ça m'inspire une histoire. Donc, c'est vrai que j'aime beaucoup observer, mais j'aime aussi rentrer dedans. J'aime aussi l'action, puis je pense que dans le roman, il y a quand même tous ces corps qui se déplacent, qui bougent, qui font des choses. Donc, ce n'est pas une contemplation inactive, c'est une contemplation active, je dirais. Mais je ne pense pas que c'est comme quelque chose comme une métaphore qui est un peu déficiente. Parce que si on dit, si on ne peut rien faire, moi, je pense qu'on peut faire quelque chose, au moins faire réfléchir, puis déjà, c'est quelque chose, ou de mettre en mouvement quelqu'un. Pour moi, un artiste ou une œuvre d'art, c'est vraiment quelque chose qui met en motion quelqu'un d'autre. Si je suis mise en motion, c'est déjà fantastique. Que ça soit dans un acte de création, dans un acte social ou dans un acte politique, déjà, ça, si c'est un moteur, c'est fantastique, tu vois.
Et déjà, la réflexion ou l'acte soit de réfléchir ou de réfléchir dans le deuxième sens de faire miroir à, et déjà aussi de soulever ce miroir, c'est déjà un acte évidemment de ce qui peut être révolutionnaire, comme on l'a vu notamment
dynamique.
Et en Roumanie,
ouais.
Un peu partout aussi dans le monde, heureusement
ouais.
et malheureusement.
Ouais.
Est-ce que vous voulez parler un petit peu de ce corps déplacé dans l'espace et dans le temps et dans le...
Oui, parce que c'est ça, je me suis rendu compte que en fait, tout ce qui anime, d'abord, l'autre fois quand on s'est parlé un peu hors cadre, tu m'as demandé si l'art et la littérature, comment ça se passe ce duo-là. Mais pour moi, c'est comme un continuum. C'est vraiment des vases communicants, c'est des réactions en chaîne, c'est l'un qui nourrit l'autre. Donc, il n'y a plus de séparation, il n'y a pas de séparation. Et là, je ne sais plus c'est quoi la question. Ah oui, le corps déplacé.
The displaced body, le corps déplacé, c'était...
C'est ça. Donc, le corps déplacé. Donc, je me suis rendu compte que, bon, je me suis dit, mais qu'est-ce qui tient tout? Tout ça? Parce qu'il y a de la littérature, il y a plusieurs médiums et tout ça. Donc, j'ai dit, mais c'est vraiment le corps déplacé. Alors, qu'est-ce que c'est ce corps déplacé? En français, ça marche mieux parce que tu as un double sens. Quand tu dis, c'est quelqu'un qui est un peu déplacé, un peu farfelu, un peu excentrique. C'est un corps excentrique parce que la performance de ce que je faisais, que je fais, donc il y a ce côté-là. C'est un corps qui bouge à travers les géographies. Pas tout le globe parce que c'est pas possible, mais certains axes de déplacement qui sont très précises et très importantes pour ce corps-là. Et un corps, le corps des langues, un corps qui bouge à travers les médiums, qui va bouger entre le mot, l'image, l'action, etc. Donc, si je regarde dans le roman, il y a ça, en fait, comme élément. Puis même l'ensemble de ce que je fais, je le vois comme une espèce de corps polymorphe, mais je le vois quand même comme un corps. Donc, je ne vois pas quelque chose qui est comme tutti frutti, mais plutôt, il y a comme une cohérence dans ces fragments-là.
Mais il y a définitivement quelque chose de transgressif. I think that the word déplacé in French doesn't, you're right that it loses some of the nuances in English because there is something transgressive or not quite rebellious, but inadvertently rebellious or something that...
Sort of eccentric, you know,
yes.
a little eccentric because, you know, the way that you put a costume and even, you know, the way, okay, I kept here like some... Celestin, you know, remember that how he's dressed up, and all of a sudden I give him this watch, you know, like it's a
or bling,
a Rolex, or I dressed him up, and it's not necessarily that, you know, it's like a artistic. It's just you know, they have something a little, you know, and I think that comes from my mom. She was totally. But when you say déplacé, could also be negative, but I take it in the positive.
Yes, of course, yeah. Displaced and mobile, therefore.
Yeah, it is mobile. Oh, yeah.
And I think, in fact, that it's funny that Mo, so the daughter of Here, in the English title, makes multiple references. One of the characters that's very present in the background is Dolores's mother, who's an opera singer who's moved her family across the globe and who has a very heavy presence, both in terms of the secrets she keeps, because she is the gatekeeper of the past notably of Dolores's father. But then we have this daughter, and so Dolores is very much between the two. So there's the mother figure, which is this huge weight anchoring her and in some way preventing her from accessing her full story, her full self. And then there's the daughter, Mo. So Mo is the second half of the French title. The title is La Jetée, a reference, of course, to the cult film that you can see an image here. The 25-minute short.
But also here, La Jetée, it's also...
Exactly. There's also Jetée on our cover. But then the second half of that title is Elle s'appellera Mo. And I was fascinated also, and the conversations we had about titles, we can both like speak to how much we were ripping our hair out about this, because obviously, like, the jetty, she will be named Mo, was totally unsellable in English. Ça n'aurait tellement jamais marché. But then there was what really intrigued me about your title in French was that future tense, Elle s'appellera Mo, whereas the title, or the novel, is completely inhabited by Mo. Elle est dans tous les recoins, c'est elle qui anime tout. She even animates the parts of the novel that happened chronologically before she was born, I find. You know, the whole love affair, the beginning of the love with Célestin, even when she thinks she can't have kids in the, you know, in the flashback to there's a flashback to the earlier novel, in fact.
Yeah, exactly.
in the trilogy or in the series. And she so animates the book. And so it's interesting that you talk a little bit about the jumelage aussi, le jumelage entre les deux livres, le jumelage entre certains événements, entre les deux vies. Et je me demandais à quel point, peut-être inconsciemment, est-ce que ces filles et ces mères étaient des versions d'elles-mêmes, quoi? Est-ce que Mo est une manifestation de quelque chose? Est-ce que vraiment dans Dolores, est-ce que il y a une énergie, quelque chose qu'elle anime, qui permet aussi d'animer Dolores? Peut-être que tous les enfants font ça, hein. Quand on a des enfants, peut-être ça nous permet ça nous rajeunit.
Non, mais elle est venue je pense qu'elle est venue au Caire dans cet appartement-là. C'est là qu'elle est apparue. Et puis moi, j'étais vraiment fière des fragments où, par exemple, il y avait une action et tout à coup, je faisais passer Mo en trottinette ou je ne sais pas quoi. Puis il y avait comme vraiment un petit passage, une interruption, une intrusion, et ça, j'adorais. Je me suis vraiment attachée à ce personnage.
Elle est très attachante.
Oui, c'est ça, j'ai mis tout mon amour. Mais c'est, en fait, ni Mo, ni Célestin ne sont pas une personne ou un personnage. C'est vraiment, c'est là où, en fait, je pourrais arriver à l'idée que, en fait, c'est un roman d'amour, c'est des amours dans tous les états, hein, entre toutes sortes de choses et puis toutes sortes de. C'est pas vraiment boys meet girl, girl meets girl, boy meets girl, or they meet they. Non, c'est vraiment tout ce qu'on peut, je sais pas, célébrer, quoi.
Mhm.
Donc, donc, dans le titre, parce que le titre initial, puis bon, tous ces romans-là, ça commençait par des demandes de bourse et je les ai eus. Donc, tout à coup, la première demande de bourse, c'était la jeter, parce que c'était que ça, elle n'avait pas d'enfant, ni Célestin, tout ça. Et donc, quand Mo est arrivée, elle s'est imposée par elle-même quelque part. Puis même Célestin s'est imposé d'une certaine façon, et je peux le dire aussi comment. Mais, et là, je me suis dit, mais alors, c'est plus la jeter, c'est vraiment... et j'ai trouvé ça beau, elle s'appelle Rameau, parce qu'en fait, c'est ça, tout est au présent, mais ça tient aussi de mon rapport au temps, parce que c'est pour ça que j'ai mis ça ici, cette ligne rouge-là, parce que je pourrais expliquer cette idée
The dateline.
Dateline. Donc, on est constamment, et puis il y a quand même une marge de jeu où on n'est ni là, ni là, ni là, et on peut être là comme on peut être de l'autre côté, même si on est là, il y a une vibration que ça peut être qu'on est dans le futur ou dans le passé, donc on n'est jamais, en fait le temps n'existe pas, mais bon, ça c'est une autre histoire. Et donc, quand tu me demandais par rapport à Mo, c'est vraiment comme un personnage composite. C'est pas, je dirais pas que c'est nécessairement une... Bon, bien sûr qu'elle fait partie d'une généalogie que je pourrais nommer, qui commence dans le premier roman et qui se ramifie, et puis on arrive à cette addition de Mo et de Célestin, en fait de Célestin, puis après ça donne... ils font un bébé, et puis voilà, Mo est né. Et donc, c'est sûr que c'est intéressant aussi comment le sang circule dans ces familles-là, parce qu'il y a Adina, la mère de Dolores, elle a du sang, je pense, hongrois. Chacun, il y a comme un mélange de sang, quoi. Puis après ça, le père de Mo, c'est ce fameux Habib.
Le père de Dolores, oui.
De Dolores, pardon. Non, oui, c'est ça, de Dolores, qui est, et puis ensuite, il y a ce Léonard qui est son, pas mari, parce que, qui est celui qui élève,
son beau-père, quoi,
c'est ça. Et donc il y a l'Afrique de l'Est. Après ça, tout à coup, il y a ce Célestin qui arrive. Donc Mo, il y a comme toute une ébullition dans son corps là et dans son background, si tu veux. Donc, elle n'est pas juste une... même Dolores, par rapport à sa mère, c'est pas comme une espèce de réverbération là, de l'une de l'autre. Mais ça fait partie d'un ensemble assez dynamique. Mais moi, j'adore ce genre d'intersection, quoi.
Et c'est une généalogie qui ne dépend pas seulement du sang non plus. Je pense que c'est très
Oui, c'est ça.
Souvent, les gens qui nous élèvent ou les souvenirs qu'on a sont plus façonnés, influencés par les gens qui nous entourent par accident ou par accident de l'histoire, quoi.
Oui, puis ici, c'est une question vraiment d'héritage, l'héritage des mères, quoi. Puis on a beaucoup parlé des mères dernièrement, même dans Catherine, Rodney, les mères qui sont mortes. Et puis bon, là ici c'est ça, c'est cette transmission des mères, parce qu'il y a la mère de Adina, puis après ça il y a Dolores, puis il y a cet enfant qui reçoit toutes ces images puis même, elle a droit à un voyage dans cette Roumanie que moi, en fait, je n'ai même pas connu exactement cette Roumanie-là des nouveaux riches et tout ça, parce que ce n'était pas dans ma famille, mais j'ai créé une famille, une branche de la famille de Dolores, que c'était des nouveaux riches en BMW et tout ça, et puis bon, je me suis un peu amusée.
Si la littérature ne nous permet pas de circuler en BMW, à quoi bon être OK?
Moi, je suis un Bixi.
Il n'y a personne qui veut lire un roman sur les Bixi, c'est ça, on met des BMW partout.
Ah, non, non.
Mais c'est intéressant aussi à quel point, je pense que ce livre, évidemment, le livre vient de paraître aux éditions Linda Leith en anglais. Et je l'ai traduit longtemps avant. Ben, je finissais les dernières corrections juste au début de la pandémie, ou juste avant la pandémie. Mais j'ai l'impression que si je l'avais traduit durant la pandémie, j'aurais eu tellement un sentiment de dislocation profonde parce que le livre vraiment a lieu partout dans le monde. Le livre est dans des aéroports, il y a une proximité qui efface le temps qui est vraiment intéressante. Et je pense que j'aurais vraiment un coup de...
Oui.
Un coup de nostalgie pour cette présence de la façon dont aussi le vol aérien efface complètement le passage du temps. Et donc, je me demande si vous voulez lire aussi, je peux lire aussi la section du Dateline, justement, dans la cabine de pilotage. Est-ce que je ne sais pas si vous l'avez ou bien?
Je vais mettre, oui, attends, juste une seconde, je vais mettre voilà. Oh. Ah non, non, ça ne marche pas. Alors, on montre ça. On est dans le cockpit, là.
Ah, parfait, j'aime bien. Very nice. Moi, je suis encore ici dans le bureau. Donc, je ne sais pas si vous voulez lire ou je peux le lire aussi. C'est pas...
Oui, c'est toi qui lis.
D'accord.
Mais, alors, ne me vous voyez pas, s'il vous plaît.
D'accord. On est quand même au salon du livre, entendons-nous. Alors, donc, un chapitre qui s'intitule en français « La tête dans les nuages ». Et je vais encore une fois le lire en français et en anglais. Donc, et après, peut-être que, je ne sais pas si tu voudrais partager avec nous l'anecdote qui a nourri cette scène. Donc, la preuve est la Dateline, vue à partir du hublot de la cabine de pilotage de cet avion de JAL, où je m'étais retrouvée quelques années auparavant. Je suis entrée pour filmer. C'était avant le 11 septembre, parce qu'on s'entend qu'après le 11 septembre, il n'y a personne qui rentre dans les cabines de pilotage. J'ai fait une entrevue avec l'hôtesse de l'air et avec le capitaine à propos de cette ligne qui sépare la Terre et le temps. Pour lui, donc pour le pilote, ce n'était que les chiffres sur les moniteurs et la voix du contrôleur d'Anchorage Alaska. Pour elle, le temps de servir des cocktails. Ils ont ri comme des gamins en trouvant ma question bizarre. What is the dateline for you? J'ai enlevé l'objectif de caméra des moniteurs, je l'ai pointé sur le ciel bleu taché de quelques nuages blancs immaculés et tout est devenu atemporel. Donc en anglais. The proof is the dateline. Right in front of the windshield of that JL flight I found myself on a few years earlier. This was before 9/11, and I had come into the cockpit to shoot. I had interviewed a flight attendant and the captain about the line that divides the Earth and splits time. For the pilot, all it meant was numbers on a monitor and the voice of the controller in Anchorage, Alaska. For the flight attendant, time to serve cocktails. They chuckled at my odd question. What does the dateline mean to you? I panned away from the monitors and pointed my camera to the sky, the blue dotted with a few immaculate white clouds, and everything flew out of time.
Et ça c'est les deux messieurs.
Magnifique.
Et là, ici, nous avons les moniteurs. Et là, on va revenir un peu plus sobre. Voilà. Non, l'anecdote est vraiment... ça s'est passé vraiment comme ça. Et puis, je n'ai pas encore monté cette vidéo, mais je vais vraiment faire quelque chose parce que c'était surtout drôle, l'hôtesse de... Parce que moi, quand elle m'a répondu ça, j'étais comme... Oh my God! Pour moi, c'est toute une théorie. Mais elle m'a dit... Yeah, we're serving cocktails. And I said, what do you serve? And she said, sandwiches. And je sais pas, elle m'a fait la liste et tout ça. Je trouvais ça vraiment formidable parce que il y a le côté pragmatique, puis le côté scientifique, parce que mathématique, puis il y a le côté qui échappe à tout ça, qui sont les nuages. Parce que tu peux pas arriver à une précision dans les nuages. Donc, c'est un peu pour montrer ces écarts-là entre ma propre mythologie de cette ligne-là. Et puis, parce que moi, I was blown away. La fois, j'étais là dans l'avion et j'ai vu, tac, d'une seconde à l'autre, c'était demain. Mais en fait, on n'était plus demain, on était aujourd'hui. Et puis, quand on était là dans ce temps zéro qu'on appelle Zulu Time, en fait, c'est même pas vrai parce que dès que tu es dedans, tu es soit un petit peu encore dans le passé, soit déjà dans le futur. Alors moi, je fonctionne comme ça. Par exemple, quand c'est l'anniversaire de quelqu'un, je félicite les gens un jour à l'avant. Dès qu'en Asie, c'est leur fête, je dis.
Parce que quelque part, c'est déjà minuit. Quelque part, c'est déjà minuit.
Ça fait partie de... Oui, puis j'ai beaucoup d'amis là-bas, donc je suis constamment, je pense que là, il y a les taïfons aux Philippines, je pense que je suis déjà là, mais c'est demain. C'est très, très étrange, mais en tout cas, alors j'aime beaucoup.
I love it, but it's also very metaphysical, right? You're like doing this deep interview or looking for some depth to the interview, and all, you know, and what kind of cocktails you serve is basically like, that's, you know, that's about as pragmatic as humans get in the face of
great. Actually, it's
time
the
and
best,
place.
the most philosophical answer you could get, you know, sandwiches and I don't know.
Cocktails. Exactly. For all the levity,
I ask you something about the title.
Yes,
I want to go back to that because for me it's very important, and I want to know how important a title is for you. And I want to congratulate you for getting this first idea of the woman, c'est quoi, la daughter of.
L'une des versions originales. So one of the things that we batted around was daughter of the daughter of the woman in the window, because of that image of Dolores like staring at the window.
It was so surprising, but I think it was great. But this one is beautiful. I mean, I was.
Well, here captures, like, there is no here, because here could be, depends if you're done serving the cocktail or if you haven't served the cocktail yet, basically.
Yeah. So but it's the
title was a huge challenge. When I was casting about for a title, and of course the pressure when you're translating a book, you think, oh, I'll deal with it later. And then all of a sudden the editor says to you, we need the catalog is going to go out in the world, and we need the thing to exist. And all of a sudden it begins to exist when there is a title. And it's kind of terrifying, because until that point, it could still be perfect. And then when you have to just kind of, you know, quand il faut accoucher d'un titre, c'est un peu, on est mis un peu devant un fait qu'on ne savait pas qu'on avait accompli. Mais je me souviens aussi, j'avais passé au peigne fin, j'ai amené quelques notes, en fait, j'ai passé au peigne fin le film de Chris Marker. So one of the central elements, of course, is this Chris Marker film. And I went through and I watched it with subtitles. I got parce qu'il y a un magnifique livre qui est évidemment le livre des stills du film, des scènes du film.
We both have it.
I know we have it. It was a Bible, honestly, for me. Even though it like 90%, no, I would say like 99% of that didn't make it into my translation. It was still latent, you know, in a way. So I had like Frozen Sun, Heartbeat, Whispers in German. I had all these random like emissaries as a possible titles. One phrase that really struck me that he uses in the film is les chevaliers du temps perdu. It's kind of like, you know, l'attachement à quelque chose qui passe. The music we had also at one point, do you remember, and I think Layla liked this but Linda hated it, so Layla was who just animated this Zoom, was also the substantive editor for this novel, and Linda, of course, is Linda Leith at Linda Leith Editions, and I forget, one of them hated it, one of them liked it, but it was The Museum of Timeless Animals. Cette scène dans le film où ils sont dans une espèce de musée.
I really liked it. That's me talking. I liked that title.
I think she's hiding under that.
I really liked that title, but then when you came up with, or I can't remember, I think it was you, Katja, who introduced Daughter of Here. I love that. That was perfect.
It's a beautiful title, so.
It worked together for sure. I did find one of the things I found more challenging, actually, and more from a personal standpoint. So as much as in the novel, Mo, for example, the daughter is such a force of good energy. She's just like, she's completely she's unquenchable in her thirst for how, you know, for finding ways that the world can be good. But for all that that positive energy, there's also this real darkness as we filter through some of the worst aspects of the 20th century, especially, and the early 21st, mostly in the form of dictators and, you know, crappy regimes and dictators that are unearthed, including literally when, as you mentioned, Ceausescu's dépouille, quand ils vont rouvrir la tombe pour prouver que c'était lui, quoi. And there's a few moments, I think I had gone back to you as well, I was looking for the English transcript of some of Ceausescu's and his wife's last words and some of their speeches. And so I was watching these films, these videos of the two of them, and it was just like,
I just can't.
Brutal. I can't imagine how you like. But I was looking for it, so I was trying to back translate to find what it was from the French, so I could find a Romanian to translate into English, so it would be, you know, more direct or something. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Somehow I felt like if I got to the more to the real thing, I would find a way to render it more realistically, I think. And so I remember I was watching these things, and there's a scene in which Dolores, when she finally reads the headline that he's being exhumed. And she spends the whole night just watching, like, down the rabbit hole of the internet, basically watching video after video and interviews and whatever. And in the dawn, in the wee hours of the morning, she's vomiting and just shitting, and she's physically ill at everything that this has dredged up in her personal past. And I felt a little bit like that when I was going through some of that. The moments with the Egyptian regime that was kind of toppling at the moment that she's in Cairo. These really these really horrible men who have dragged humanity through
and there's more around. I mean, they're not, you know, like this. They're multiplying like.
That'll be your next novel. Don't save us. No, mais il y avait vraiment un sentiment de, I don't know if like, as a writer, you sometimes, and as you know, you inhabit your characters, but as a translator, it felt strange to also do that for this novel, more than I think I was inhabiting not just the character that you had created and the stories that you had created, but also the whole character of the 20th century in some way. And it was...
So you felt nauseous too.
Oh, c'est pas évident.
But can you tell me, I'm very curious about your process, you know, the translation. How do you, from the moment you get the book, and how did you relate to the book? Are you just jumping in one place, or you go, how do you approach with your body? I think it's probably with your body, not just with your...
Yeah, I think that's fair. I never translate two books at once because I feel like the voices would be, I can't wear those two coats at the same time. I generally do a first just literal bash through, and I highlight things, or I leave little flags for myself saying, so this, I know this doesn't work, come back, or, you know, I leave chunks in French that I want to come back to, or the original language. And then I come back and I rewrite everything in an English that maybe has nothing to do with the French anymore, but an English that I feel like is more English, basically, and an English that feels stylistically plausible, and in which the characters are themselves in a way that feels plausible. And then I go back a third time, although I think I was looking through my drafts just in preparation for tonight, and there are 11 drafts of this before going to copy editing, so there's quite a few.
You had a screenshot, no? Don't you have a screenshot?
Yeah, I have some of my edits here. I mean, I'll try to pull one up. It was fairly enormous as an undertaking. And then so I go through, and in my subsequent revisions of myself, I come back to the French. And so if there's issues that things don't work, or I try to restore some faith in the faithlessness that I've allowed myself. And as far as how the body is, it was interesting actually, because I found the voice really hard to get in this one. I found that there was really, Dolores had so many permutations of herself that I sometimes would lose the voice. And I listened to the book was mentioned actually by Richard King on CBC on his book show a few months ago, or maybe a couple months ago. And he made a comment that was about the possibility of reading the book anachronistically, that is, of leaping in and perhaps darting around and coming back and deking back to the beginning. And that's kind of how I wound up finding my way through the voice. I didn't translate just the Cairo sections and just the Romania sections.
Yeah,
and just
go in a linear way.
I worked through linearly, but I definitely had moments when I thought, okay, that's Dolores in a different part. And so I would go back and kind of fix some of, even to the adjectives that she wouldn't have used, even just, or little repetitions, or the kind of, when she gets really weepy in the airport, these moments when I thought that didn't fit her anymore because I had translated her beyond that moment. You know what I mean? So I had to kind of come back and rein myself in because I had let her get ahead of herself somehow. And yeah, in terms of, we can definitely go to questions in a second, but I think you had asked me about edits. So let me show you, if anybody is curious, what draft 7 of 11 looked like. So this is, and I had comments. I have the advantage in this case of working with an author whose English is perfect. And so you were actually the first and probably the worst best reader or the best worst reader. It was magnificent because you could say to me, like, down to the little, and I've worked, for example, when I've translated Martine Delvaux, the same thing is true. She goes through it with like really a fine-tooth comb. And I think authors whose English is strong enough to do that are a real gift, because you have access to the person's brain and to how they hear themselves in the target language, which is really a rarity.
But to remember the first time we met, I told you, I'm just gonna leave you as if I didn't speak the language, because that's an interesting too, when you don't know, like in Japanese or some other language you don't speak, you have to let it go, like completely in the hands of that person who could do anything. And in our case, we could negotiate or whatever, push the text together at some point.
It was totally negotiation, and it was great, actually. I'm glad it worked out that way.
And I really want to tell you, I mean, now we're speaking about, I really want to tell you that I love this translation. It's really fantastic. So thank you so much.
Merci. Thank you for doing all the work.
Yeah.
The nice thing about translating is that all the thoughts have already been thought out. All the characters are already created. All of the, all of the échafaudage is already organized. I see that Leila is flagging a question for us from the vast public.
Yes, the vast public.
The masses.
Oh, we have a second question. Oh, okay. So somebody wants to know, Catherine Kassir would like to know, how do you work together? Do you consult together, or did the translator go off by herself and work alone?
In this
a bit of it, but in general, like, do you like to, I mean, do you like to go off and just do a huge chunk, get it done, going very far in your own direction, and then bring it back to the author? Or do you like...
I prefer that, though. I think I also impose that on Ioana to a certain extent. I don't know if you can speak to that. I don't know if you would have been more comfortable if you'd been in on it earlier on, Ioana, or because I try not to even work with the author until I have that first kind of bang through, because I think that otherwise the voice would be, I mean, for example, well, Ioana, you can answer this as well, but I find that reading someone like Nancy Houston is interesting in English and in French because she translates herself. She writes in her second language in English and then translates herself back in, oh no, sorry, the opposite. She writes in French, pardon me, in her second language and then translates herself back into English, which is her first language. And I find that the French original is her voice and the English always reads a little bit boiteux, a little bit, I'm sorry, I'm insulting Nancy Houston on whatever kind of national television this is, but I find that I don't want the author's perception of their voice in the target language to overtake what will be their voice because it can't be theirs anymore.
That's fair enough because, yeah.
And do you feel comfortable doing that? Do you feel comfortable?
No, as I told you, yeah, I was comfortable to let, yeah, I mean, I liked the way it came, like the moment was right it took a long time, but then when it came to me, it was the right, I didn't want to be involved like from the beginning and sort of be controlling or, I think the translator should have a freedom, should feel free, and then she or he would be really creative and dynamic. But if you feel the author is like, don't touch my words, don't, it must be terrible. Because then
you were great to answer questions, though. I'm grateful to have you along, at that point, for sure. It's precious to have that.
I really enjoyed that ping pong in that stage, and I think it gave some. And then Leila came and the final touches, and Linda, I guess, and everybody. So I think it was a women's team, and I think it's great. Like everybody, and Jennifer, and I forgot the designer's name.
Debbie Geltner.
Yes.
Debbie. So it was just a team of just women. So I like that, it gave a nice daughter. We have a nice daughter together.
So we have another question from Samia. Why is La Jetée so important to the book? I saw that film like 25 years ago. And so when you started talking, I missed a little bit because I was troubleshooting with Facebook. Why is this film so important? And can you talk a bit what the film is about? And I mean, it's a very powerful, strange film. Actually,
the film is not really central to the book. Like when you said it was inspired, like on the Couverture 4, it's not really inspired. It's there, it's installed, it reverberates, it's kind of, it's there, but it's not the main source of inspiration. The main source of inspiration is this story that keeps going from one novel to the other. The relationship to the time, it's this date line behind which, you have on one side, you have the past, a sort of present, but which is present, past, blah, 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 and then the future, which becomes present. So that's more important than the relationship that he has with time, because basically why I like I loved that film is it's a very visionary film. Like even today, you see it today and you see what's actually happening here, you know, and now. And the way he treats time and space, for me, it's fantastic. And also
about the story of that film, the plot.
Maybe if Katya wants to, because she really went so much into the story and the script and the book and all that, I would leave Katya speak about the film. But before that, I just wanted to say that for me, La Jetée, in the title, it's not the title of the film, it's really the La Digue, it's the bar, basically that bar with, because in all my books I have like an enclosed space, which in this case you have the bar and the apartment, and then everything explodes, the wall fall and you go outside. So you have dehors et dedans, and the dedans could inflate. And so La Jetée is many things. It's a spatial temporal metaphor, is the film, but it's not the film like central. The film is there. So I leave Katya explain a little bit how she...
There's the cameo, right? This Chris Marker has a cameo in the novel. And in fact, there's a poster, Chris Marker, of another film in that bar. Well, there's several because the bar is named after is named for the film. And so I feel like the book itself, the movie was had a cameo in the novel as opposed to being an inspiration for it or something. So just I'm not doing his thought patterns justice at all and summarizing it like this, but essentially this is post-World War III. It's this black and white movie comprised entirely of stills. There's only one shot, like one camera shot in the whole thing, because as I understand, he couldn't afford to shoot it, so he just took stills. It's black and white, and the main character has to go back in the past to retrieve memories that are the key to restoring the future, to the post-human future, basically, the post-apocalyptic future. And so the book hinges on his memories of his life with him in them and with him not in them, and includes him seeing his own death, but not realizing he's seeing it until the very end. And the key to triggering the memories is this love affair he has with this woman that he sees on the jetty, on the airport, the roof of the airport, the open concrete structure. And he realizes long after that he knows her, and he goes back in the past to meet her. And they meet in the past as if it were the first time and kind of date and go to the museum and do all these, you know, datey things. But it's really heartbreaking because it's always, we're always watching it from the vantage of knowing that it's heartbreaking because he's only retrieving memories, and so everything is already over. Et je pense que pour moi, c'est ça, beaucoup plus que les images du film, ou beaucoup plus que la thématique de la Troisième Guerre mondiale, etc. du film, c'est beaucoup plus ce sens de... on est toujours en train de briser notre propre cœur en existant à l'extérieur de soi-même à l'avenir. Donc même Dolores dans le film, elle a une fille, mais à un moment donné, elle croyait ne pas pouvoir avoir des enfants. Ou bien elle a déjà rencontré Célestin, il est déjà parti ailleurs dans le monde parce qu'il voyage beaucoup, il s'apprête à revenir, mais elle peut déjà revivre ce moment où ils se sont rencontrés, ce moment du premier geste, la première sortie, la première caresse. Et donc je pense que cette relation autant que avec laquelle Marker joue dans le film était plus importante pour moi peut-être que vraiment le sens ou disons l'histoire du film telle qu'elle est.
Oui, puis tu as mentionné le caméo. En fait, c'est un double caméo parce que un premier, c'est dans le film de Wenders, Tokyo Ga. Il y a une scène qui est tournée dans le bar La Jetée qui existe réellement à Tokyo.
On ira une fois, on fera un autre lancement là-bas.
Oui, ça serait, mais c'est tout petit, mais on peut le faire. Moi, quand on peut prendre l'avion, on y va. Et puis, dans le film de Wim Wenders, on voit Chris Marker derrière un journal, parce que lui, il n'aimait pas être très médiatisé. C'était quelqu'un de très discret, il travaillait beaucoup, il travaillait non seulement en cinéma, photo, mais vers la fin, il faisait de l'installation, new media. C'est quelqu'un qui a vraiment continué à travailler avec l'air du temps. Il ne s'est pas arrêté dans les années 60. Et donc, même si on regarde La Jetée, c'est vraiment un film qui est d'une actualité formidable. Et le deuxième caméo est venu avec sa mort, qui est arrivée à la toute fin. Je mettais les dernières lignes du roman, et là, il est mort le même jour de sa naissance. Et là, donc, j'ai imaginé cette scène dans le bar, mais dans le futur avec Tomoyo et Yuko et lui qui sont là tous en blanc et tout ça. Donc, il y a cette scène dans le je ne sais pas si c'est ce caméo dont tu parles ou bien...
Je parlais justement quand elle est dans le bar derrière le journal, lit le journal et puis elle se trouve dans le bar.
Ça.
Et elle remarque que c'est lui, mais nous, on sait plus qu'elle que c'est lui.
C'est clin d'œil à Wenders, puis après, le deuxième, bon.
Exactly.
Donc, c'est ça le...
I think it found its way to the back cover in part because it's a selling point. I didn't realize when I started mentioning to people that I was translating this and what that there was that mention, how fundamental this movie was for so many people that really c'est là-dessus qu'ils accrochaient. Mais j'ai dit non, c'est le Caire, c'est la Roumanie, c'est ci, c'est ça, c'est l'amour, c'est blabla. Non, mais la jeter. Beaucoup de gens, donc. Mais même si les gens vont l'acheter pour la jeter, allez l'acheter pour la jeter, puis vous resterez pour le reste.
Oh, mais that's great. Because no, elle est là.
Look at the cover after the poster.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you came. I wanted to ask you about that, and I wanted just to also do a nota bene about So tell me how you thought about.
Well, I had seen the film years ago, and anyways, just as we're thinking about how we're going to design the cover, posters from that era are very striking. So I was like, let's find a poster, and maybe we could sort of copy it. And this was perfect because there is a poster of a woman. Yes, this is the cover. And I don't have the poster, which is too bad, but it's a woman.
This is the photo.
And the titling, the text and the font is exactly as in the poster from the mid-60s. So we were able to do it.
It came really, I think it really came very nicely, this combination. And then you asked for...
And then you asked for the red spine. Isn't that nice? I love it.
Red spine. And I gave you this little picture, which actually it was taken by my father on the jetty of in Mangalia à la Mer Noire, and I think it really gives the feeling of what you had in mind. With it made a very nice. It gave a.
Maybe can I read that section with the dress?
Yeah.
Est-ce que je lis en français ou en anglais? Qu'est-ce que je fais?
Comes through.
Because we're talking about the...
You might as well do it in English.
Okay, because I think we're going to be running out of time. So this is a section in which Dolores, and we'll maybe close with this, a section in which Dolores is discussing, is in her head saying to her daughter what she wants to give her of her life. I will leave you a photograph too, the picture with the white dress. A little girl stands on a jetty on the Black Sea. She's wearing a white dress, the same dress she'll be wearing soon at the Domenico Mondugno concert in Bucharest. She's against the middle of the wall, her back to the camera, half in profile. Her skin is darker than usual. The summer has been unusually sunny. Her frizzy hair is cut short, and it's dry from the salt and sun. It's her last summer in Romania. Who knows what's going through her head? What she doesn't know is that soon she will find herself on a night train, barreling through endless tunnels. She is walking toward the lighthouse at the end of the jetty, her mind elsewhere. The fishermen haven't arrived yet, with their reels and their bamboo rods. To the left, the child's shadow stretches long, but not the photographer's, who stays a good distance away. Mo, one day I will show you that jetty in person. I'll take a picture of you at the same place, on the white line that splits the gray cement. You can tuck it away in your photo album.
A good ending for our...
Beautiful. Yeah.
And before we leave, I just want a big thank to Linda Leith for welcoming this project and making it happen in such a great way. So thank you, Linda, and thank you, Salon du Livre, for having us here. And thank you, Leila and Katya, and I hope we'll see you again.
In
person. Oh, we miss in-persons, don't we?
Yeah. So we'll go in a park. Let's meet on the Canal Lachine or whatever.
Yeah.
So
thank you very much. This was very nice. Very nice evening.
Merci à vous deux.
Okay.
Merci.
Thank you everybody who joined us.
Be safe, everybody. Soyez tous en santé. Puis on va se voir en personne.
Bonne lecture.
Bye bye.
Ciao.